Early one morning, Takei is running to the school gymnasium, but aside from his enthusiasm to practice, there's someone there that he wants to see, and the second he arrives and opens the gym door, he is mesmerized by Chinatsu's beauty, but he also gets hit in the face with a basketball. Once Chinatsu realizes what she has done, she rushes over to him and begins apologizing because she didn't see him enter. Takei doesn't really mind though, and honestly, he's just glad that he gets the chance to talk to her, because to him, she's the perfect girl. She defends, she attack, but most importantly, she always has pocket Kit Kat. The Kit Kat is her way of apologizing for the ball he took to the face, and Takei is more than happy to accept. Later on in the day, the gym is packed, and Takei is currently fantasizing about what his life could be if he were married to Chinatsu, but his friend gives him a reality check and says that's never going to happen. He can't even ask her out on a date, so how exactly does he intend to get married to her? Even if he had the courage to ask her out, she's the Kobe of the girls' basketball team, and she's pretty popular both in and out of the school. In contrast, Takei plays badminton, and he hasn't achieved a single thing, nor has he even played in any tournaments, so Chinatsu is way out of his league. To top it all off, the only time he ever gets to talk to her is when he gets here early to practice, and he couldn't possibly ask her out then. Takei retorts that he has other ways of naturally contacting Chinatsu, because his mom is an alumnus for the basketball team, so he can weasel his way in somehow. Takei realizes that getting together with Chinatsu is pretty much a fool's dream for him, but he also knows that he will never get anywhere with her if he doesn't at least try. Kyo sees that Takei is serious about this, so as a friendly word of advice, he tells him to work on getting her to remember his name first, then he can work on asking for her contact info and go from there. Just then, another one of Takei's friends walks up behind him and asks what Takei is thinking about, but she nearly knocked him down to get his attention. So Takei starts yelling and calls her a child, but she retorts that she's in the same class as Takei. He then calls her short because she has barely grown at all since middle school, but Takei is also short, so he doesn't have much high ground to mock her from. Once the two of them stop fighting, Hina asks Takei if there's a problem he needs help with because he looks anxious and he wouldn't exactly consider it a problem, but he has been trying to figure out a way to get girls to like him. Hina is excited to hear this and immediately offers to help by going down her list of things girls find attractive in a guy, like reliability, coolness, and being as hot as a movie star with a 12-inch magnum. She was a little too enthusiastic about that last part, so Takei and Kyo get a little weirded out, and while heading at the gym, he regrets ever asking her about it. Just then, his train of thought is cut off because while he was thinking of ways to get close to Chinatsu, he failed to notice that she was sitting on the steps outside the gymnasium. The door must still be locked, so this is the perfect chance for him to start a conversation with her. He just needs to figure out what to say. At first, he thinks about just introducing himself, but he thinks that would be a little too straightforward, so he wants to naturally start a conversation with her by asking about the book she's reading. But then he notices that the book is about basketball strategy, and he knows nothing about that, so he wouldn't be able to hold a conversation on the topic. He decides to just stay quiet to avoid embarrassing himself, but then the perfect opportunity presents itself as Chinatsu sneezes, so Takei immediately gets on his knees and offers her his scarf. Chinatsu is a bit shocked by the sudden gesture, but Takei is nowhere near done because he starts pulling out all sorts of warm stuff, including hot tea, gloves, and a pocket heater. A few seconds later, Chinatsu realizes he may have been a little too enthusiastic about helping her, but Chinatsu is smiling at him, so it must have worked out well. She thought he was funny and honestly wanted to see how much stuff he had packed in his backpack. She appreciates Takei trying to look out for her, but she says he needs to keep himself warm as well and gives him his scarf back. This situation is better than anything Takei could have hoped for because it's basically the same thing newlyweds do for their husbands. Just as she finishes fixing his scarf, the officer with the key arrives, so she calls Takei by name and says goodbye. Takei is shocked that she knew his name, and he wonders if Chinatsu has been paying attention to him all this time as well, but it turns out that she just saw the name tag on his scarf. It's embarrassing, but he did get her to say his name, so for today, a win is a win. The next day, Takei has just finished his badminton practice, so he is taking a break, but he's still giddy with excitement from the fact that Chinatsu now knows his name. He has successfully become acquainted with her, so the next step is to get her to give him her contact info. As he leaves the locker room, he happens to notice Chinatsu outside talking with a basketball coach, and he can't help but stare at her. But when Hina walks up and notices him staring, she immediately figures out that Takei has a crush on Chinatsu, and she offers her condolences for the inevitable rejection he's going to face. Takei denies having any feelings for Chinatsu, so Hina tells him she heard Chinatsu actually has a boyfriend, and Takei starts freaking out, but it turns out she was just lying to mess with him. Late into the evening, once everyone is done with their training, all the guys are getting ready to head home, but Takei realizes he forgot his towel in the gym, so he has to head back over to get it. Thankfully, the gym door is still unlocked, but as he walks inside, he's surprised to see Chinatsu is still practicing. He doesn't really know what to say, so he asks why she's still practicing when it's so late. Chinatsu explains that she wasn't satisfied with the way she played during training today, so she wants to practice a little before heading home. She's about to go back to her practice, but since Takei is here now, she throws him the ball and asks him to play one-on-one with her. He's caught off guard by her request, but he goes along with it anyway, and although he's not as good as Chinatsu, he holds up pretty well. She compliments him on his stamina, so he tells her that his mom used to be on the basketball team, so she would play with him sometimes. Coincidentally, Chinatsu's mom also used to be on the basketball team, so they played together all the time before she joined the school's team. She asks if Takei has ever thought about playing basketball as well, and he has. He was a little too intense for his teammates, but didn't work out. Besides, he enjoys badminton a lot more because he stands alone on his side, so he is solely responsible for his victory or loss, and he loves the rush he feels because of it. Chinatsu thinks that must be why Takei works so hard, but he actually has a different reason. A year and a half ago, when Chinatsu graduated from junior high, Takei happened to be in school over the break, so he wanted to pack up a few things he left behind. But as he opened the door, even though there was no practice scheduled for that day, he saw Chinatsu hard at work, training with tears in her eyes. Takei later heard about how Chinatsu missed her shot to qualify for nationals by a hair, and he couldn't imagine how disappointed Chinatsu must have felt after all the hard work she put in. But seeing her work so hard made him want to work hard as well. Hearing that from Takei struck a chord with Chinatsu, but before she can say anything, the facility officer comes in and tells them that they need to start heading home because he needs to lock up. Chinatsu and Takei start putting away all the balls, but as Chinatsu is pushing the ball cart, one falls out and both of them try to catch it, leading to some unintentional hand-touching. The next morning, Takei is eager to get to school and see Chinatsu again, so he rushes downstairs and greets his mom, who tells him she packed a lunchbox for him. As he picks it up, he notices a magazine with Chinatsu on it, and his mom is surprised he recognizes her, so she asks if they are friends. Back in the day, Takei's mom and Chinatsu's mom used to be on the same basketball team, and they were practically inseparable. While she says this, Takei is busy thinking about how he could totally use this to get close to Chinatsu. Unfortunately, his mother drops a bombshell and tells him that Chinatsu is moving overseas soon, and Takei does not take the news well. They are apparently set to move in mid-March, and now that he thinks about it, that was probably what Chinatsu was talking to her coach about the last time he saw her. You can't let things end like this, so he sprints out the door and starts running to school so he can talk to Chinatsu. There's no way she could be happy moving away after all the hard work she has put into her basketball career here, so he has something he wants to tell her. Chinatsu is in the gym as usual, so once Takei gets there, he is out of breath, and she asks if something's wrong. Takei needs a moment to catch his breath, but once he does, he tells Chinatsu that he wants her to make it to the nationals this year. He learned from her that working hard towards your goals and continuing to work hard even when you lose is what's really important, so he doesn't want to see her give up on her dreams. Chinatsu cuts him off there to make a small correction because she isn't actually traveling abroad. Takei is beyond confused, so she explains that her family will indeed be traveling, but she isn't going with them and will be staying with an acquaintance instead. The silence is deafening at this point, and it may be good news for Takei that she won't be traveling after all. But he's incredibly embarrassed after his unnecessary outburst, so he turns around to leave. Before he leaves, Chinatsu tells him that it was really tough for her to make that decision because she knows she's going to be really lonely without her family around. But thanks to the chat she had with him yesterday, she remembered the pain she felt after failing the qualifiers last time, and that made her realize that she wants to try again so she can make it to nationals. She never would have been able to make the decision without the insight he gave her, so she sincerely wants to thank Takei. He doesn't feel like he did anything special, but it was really special to Chinatsu. So she invites him to play basketball with her sometime, and he agrees, but only if she plays badminton with him as well. Today was another victory for Takei, but for days to come, every waking moment of his will be haunted by all the cringe things he said. He's glad today is Sunday, because for once, he really doesn't want to see Chinatsu. However, as he goes downstairs, he is shocked to see her standing in his kitchen. Yeah, remember that acquaintance Chinatsu said she would be living with while her family is gone. It turns out it was Takei's mom, so she's going to be living with him starting next spring. When the time finally comes for Chinatsu to move in, Takei's entire family comes out to greet her, and they are all extremely welcoming, but Takei is still having a hard time accepting that this is his reality now. He was having a hard enough time talking to her at school, so how's he supposed to handle seeing her every day for the next 2 years? And just as he is having his mental breakdown, Chinatsu knocks on his door to tell him that it's his turn to use the bath. The first thing Takei notices is that Chinatsu is still damp from the bath, and his mind is immediately filled with all kinds of impure thoughts, so he tries to distract himself by reading his Jump magazine. He's doing his best not to think about her, but then she gets up close to his face to see what he's reading, and it's a lot harder to ignore her now. She recognizes the Shonen Jump series because she follows it as well, although she hasn't gotten to read this issue yet, so Takei offers to just lend it to her so she can catch up on her favorite manga. Takei panics a little when he sees Chinatsu staring at him, and he's trying his hardest to keep his cool, but she is smiling because she's just glad that he's here with her. It is really nerve-wracking for her to live in someone else's house, and even though their mothers are friends, she has only met Takei's mom a couple of times before, so having Takei around is really comforting. With that said, she wishes him a good night and leaves his room, after which Takei heads to the bathroom for his bath. He feels guilty for thinking unholy thoughts when Chinatsu is looking to him for comfort, and she didn't seem all that bothered by the idea of living under the same roof with a guy, so he's going to do his best to act normal around her as well. But that's easier said than done, because when he realizes he is going to be using the same bath water as Chinatsu, he loses his cool, and if things keep going like this, he won't make it halfway through November. The next morning, Takei is full of energy, so he is putting his all into his training, and Kyo understands why Takei is happy, but he warns him not to let others find out about his new living situation. Takei doesn't see what the problem could be, so Kyo directs his attention to the side of the court where Chinatsu is training, but he isn't pointing at Chinatsu. He is pointing at the legion of fanboys who have a crush on her just like him. If Taiki slips up and the other guys find out that Chinatsu is living with him, he will become a major target for them no matter where he goes. Still, Kiyo has to admit that it's really lucky that Chinatsu moved into his house right when he was looking for a way to get close to her so he could ask her out. But Taiki doesn't intend to do that anymore. Chinatsu is only staying in Japan because she wants to achieve her goal of making it to the basketball nationals, so he can't take advantage of that and ask her out as he is now. That is why he has set a goal for himself as well and intends to do whatever it takes to make it to the badminton nationals this year. Kiyo thinks a dream like that is a little too big for Taiki, especially since he has never tried to compete on a national level, but Taiki feels like he needs to do this so he can measure up to Chinatsu. And besides, even if he ends up failing, he still wants to see how far he can go. So he asks Kiyo to play another match with him, but Kiyo has had enough and says he's taking a break. While Kiyo is out, Taiki gets right back to practicing and Hina notices that Taiki is a lot more enthusiastic than he usually is, so she asks Kiyo if something happened, and he tells her that Taiki is planning to make it to nationals this year. She is surprised to hear this and asks if Kiyo thinks Taiki can pull it off, and Kiyo doesn't have much faith that Taiki will manage it, but he is clearly not going to give up until he does. Back at home, Taiki continues his training routine and works out while reviewing some of his gameplay from earlier today. He is so into it that he fails to notice Chinatsu by the door, and once he finally does notice her, she asks what he's doing. Taiki explains that he had someone record him while he played today, so he was just reviewing the footage. He doesn't want to show Chinatsu the footage because he's embarrassed, but Chinatsu points out that she's always watching him practice when they're at school, so it makes no difference if she sees his recording. Taiki is internally ecstatic to find out that Chinatsu pays attention to him in school, and she makes a good point, so he shows her the recording and Chinatsu is amazed by how quickly he moves on the court, but Taiki isn't happy with his current level of performance at all. He is still far too slow to compete among the best, so he needs to work on that if he wants to make it to nationals. Taiki then realizes that he said all that out loud in front of Chinatsu, so he tries to take it back, but it's too late. She heard him loud and clear, so she starts badgering him until he admits that he wants to make it to nationals as well. Once he finally says it directly, Chinatsu tells him to wait a minute because she has something to give him. She runs over to her room and returns a few moments later with a promise bracelet for Taiki. She made a pair when she first decided to stay in Japan because she wanted to have something tangible to symbolize her resolve, and she figured Taiki might appreciate having one as well. Of course, she isn't forcing him to take it if he doesn't want to, but Taiki is more than happy to receive a gift from Chinatsu, so he swears that he will cherish it for the rest of his life. He is a little too enthusiastic about putting it on and is doing it way too tight, so Chinatsu offers to put it on for him instead so he doesn't cut off circulation to his foot. While helping him, Chinatsu expresses how much she hopes Taiki can make it to nationals with her, and once she's done, she wishes him a good night and leaves. Taiki was already planning on working hard, but now that he knows Chinatsu is rooting for him, he's going to work even harder than before, and to make sure he stays focused, he will do 30 sit-ups every time he has any impure thoughts about Chinatsu. The next morning in the gym, Taiki is busy doing sit-ups for no particular reason when Hina walks up to him. She asks why he's doing all those sit-ups, so he explains that he is trying to rid himself of impure thoughts, although he keeps the details vague. Hina is quick to catch on and figures something must have happened between Taiki and that basketball girl he likes, so she starts prying for more info. This is the last thing Taiki wanted to deal with because if Hina manages to find out that the Chinatsu is living with him, then she'll end up telling everyone in the school because she's terrible with secrets. Taiki is desperately trying to shake Hina off, but he ends up running into Chinatsu, and she wants to give him his wallet since he forgot it at home. But Taiki freaks out and interrupts her because he can't let Hina find out that they live together. Chinatsu figures out that Taiki is trying to hide their situation from Hina, so she just smiles and walks away like Taiki is an absolute stranger, and Taiki is starting to think he may have overreacted a little. He later goes to talk to Kiyo about it, and Kiyo calls him an idiot for the way he handled things. From Chinatsu's perspective, it must have looked like Taiki was trying to act like he doesn't know her, and that could lead to all sorts of misunderstandings, possibly even making her think that he hates being around her, which is the exact opposite of the truth. Just then, both Taiki and Kiyo are called over by a faculty officer, and the man instructs them to help him carry some chairs over to the other side of the building. By coincidence, Hina and Chinatsu were nearby as well, so the man asks them to help with the chairs as well. Taiki thinks this could be the perfect opportunity to clear up the misunderstandings with Chinatsu. However, as he offers to help her carry some of the chairs, she says no thanks and walks away like he's a stranger. She's definitely got to be angry about the way he acted earlier, and as Hina sees this, she decides to take it upon herself to become Taiki's wingwoman. While they all walk to the other side of the building, Hina goes up to Chinatsu and asks if she's got a boyfriend, and though it's an odd question to be asked out of nowhere, Chinatsu answers that she is single right now. Hina then asks if Chinatsu would like to have a boyfriend. The answer is no, since she is focusing all her energy on basketball, so she doesn't have time for dating. Hina starts panicking since she believes Taiki must be devastated by this news, but he already knew Chinatsu would respond like that because basketball is the most important thing to her. Once they are down moving the chairs, they get back to practice, and while Taiki is hard at work, he notices Chinatsu take a nasty fall, and he would like to go check on her. But he hesitates because he can't have people realize that they are close. When Chinatsu goes to take a break, he follows her and asks if she's alright. Chinatsu says she is fine, but she's surprised he came to talk to her because she thought he wanted to act like strangers at school. Teiki apologizes for not talking to her about this sooner, but she is really popular here, and if people found out they were living together, all sorts of rumors would start flying around, and it would only distract them from their training. Chinatsu understands that, but she honestly thought Teiki was ignoring her because he liked Hina. He only started acting like that in front of Hina, and then Hina started probing to find out if Chinatsu had a boyfriend. So Chinatsu assumed Hina and Teiki might have a thing for each other. She was even considering sleeping in the shed from now on so she would make things awkward, but she completely misread the situation and Teiki finds that adorable. Now that the misunderstanding is cleared up, they head back to practice, and the badminton coach addresses all the players to prepare them for the upcoming preliminaries. Those who show exceptional skill will be put on the school's team and have the chance to play through the qualifiers for the regional and prefectural tournaments till nationals. Teiki will have to place first or second in the prefecture in order to qualify for nationals, and to do that, he's going to have to be better than Haryu, who placed third in the tournament last year. Teiki notices that the number of spectators has been increasing lately, although half of them are here to watch Chinatsu play, and the other half are here to watch Hina's gymnastics routine. Hina is so good that she is already ranked 4th among the best gymnasts in the country, and continues to improve so that she could one day become number 1. Once she is done with her routine, she goes over to Teiki and demands payment for looking at her so much, and Teiki knows she's just messing with him, but if he plays along, Chinatsu might start to think he likes Hina again, so he turns to go back to practice, but that makes Hina feel like Teiki is avoiding her. Later that day, while Teiki is heading home for the day, Hina sneaks up behind him as a surprise. Teiki has no idea why she's here since her house is in the opposite direction, but Hina explains that a famous chiropractor opened an office in the Azuma area, so she's here to check it out. Teiki thinks that's cool, but then he realizes that he lives in the Azuma area, so if he's not careful, Hina might see Chinatsu walking into his house and his secret will get out. To stop that from happening, he intends to get Hina in and out of the chiropractor's office before Chinatsu gets home, but that's difficult to do because Hina keeps stopping along the way to look at cute things. When she gets distracted by a takoyaki stand, Teiki offers to just buy some for her so they can get moving again. But even though Hina really wants some, she turns it down because she can't afford to gain weight. As a top gymnast, she needs to keep her body in perfect condition. And when it comes down to it, it's a lot easier to stop herself from eating excess than it is to work out and burn off the extra calories. Hina notices that Teiki has a weird look on his face, but he's just in disbelief that someone like Hina could actually be so disciplined. Jokes aside, Hina is on a totally different level of talent than he is, so we can't help but admire how dedicated and cool she is. Hina appreciates the compliment, and she says she also thinks Teiki is cool. After all, he can now hold a conversation with the girl he likes instead of awkwardly staring at her from across the gym like he used to. Teiki can tell she's making fun of him, but Hina is serious when she says she will do anything to help with Teiki's love life because they are best friends. Just then, Teiki notices that Hina is staring at someone behind him, and while Hina tries to stop him from looking, he turns around anyway and sees Chinatsu and Hayaru walking together. Teiki immediately freezes up, so Hina tried to make him feel better by saying Haryu is probably just Chinatsu's friend, so walking home together isn't out of the ordinary. After all, he's walking with Hina, and there's nothing going on between them. Teiki agrees with her, so he acts like nothing happened, but the next day, Chinatsu is still hanging out with Haryu, so it's a lot harder for him to ignore at this point. Hina tells him there's no need to worry since Chinatsu said she doesn't have time for relationships since she's focusing all her efforts on basketball. And while that may be true, Teiki is still worried because she might end up falling in love with Haryu anyway. Practice goes on as usual that day, and from what the coach can see, Haryu is going to be the star of the team, although he also sees a lot of potential in Teiki, so he has high hopes for him. A little while later, Teiki is taking a break from practice and Chinatsu happens to drop a ball near him, so she runs over to get it. Teiki still feels awkward talking to her because he's jealous she was hanging out with Haryu, but before he can leave, she asks him when he will be done with his training today. She forgot her key, and Teiki's parents aren't going to be at home to let her in. He tells her his practice ends at 7, and coincidentally so does hers, so Teiki is about to suggest that they walk home together. But just then, Haryu comes over and asks Chinatsu if she has an extra timer. This wouldn't be an issue normally, but Haryu calls her by a nickname Chi, and that makes Teiki even more jealous than he already was. He runs home while wondering how close Haryu and Chinatsu really are because they've gotten so close that they can use nicknames. How is Teiki meant to compete with that? In the end, there's nothing he can do about it since those two are classmates and Chinatsu is a year older than him, so even if she asked him to call her by a nickname, he wouldn't be able to bring himself to do it. Just then, Chinatsu returns home and Teiki is so shocked that he has a mini heart attack. Chinatsu is surprised that Teiki made it back home so soon because when she left school, the rest of the badminton team were still in her club room changing, so she thought Teiki wouldn't be home for a while. She notices that he is really sweaty, so she asks Teiki if he ran home as soon as practice ended because he didn't want to make her wait outside until he got back, because if so, she wants him to know she really appreciates it. Teiki did run back from school, but the fact that Chinatsu was paying enough attention to notice makes him feel stupid for worrying about the attention she's giving Haryu. He decides to go on a late-night run to cool his head and reminds himself that he needs to focus on doing well in the interdepartmental matches, although seeing her spend time with Haryu is still going to sting a little. The next day at the interdepartmental matches, Teiki is at the top of his game because he has won every single game so far, and while he is happy with his performance, he can't let himself become overconfident because Haryu has been doing just as well as he is. Speaking of Haryu, Kiyo has been meaning to ask what the deal is between Haryu and Shinatsu since they've been hanging out all the time recently, but Teiki says he doesn't want to talk about it because he decided that he wouldn't let it get to him anymore. However, as they walk out of the gym, they happen to spot Haryu and Shinatsu, along with some of their friends talking to one another, and Teiki is still trying to avoid thinking about them. So he turns around to is about to walk away, but it really hurts to hear Shinatsu be so nice to Haryu. After Shinatsu leaves, Haryu's friend brings up the fact that Haryu has been hanging out with Shinatsu a lot lately, and he's starting to suspect that something is going on between them. But Haryu denies it since both he and Shinatsu are way too busy with their sports to be in a relationship. Although he admits that it's nice seeing a girl working so hard, and Teiki thinks that means he may like Shinatsu more than he wants to admit, and that's bad news for him. By coincidence, Teiki is set to go up against Haryu in the next match, and he's choking bad. This was to be expected since Haryu is leagues above Teiki in terms of skill, but what's worse is the way Teiki must feel because he is losing to his rival for Chinatsu's attention. By the time the first round is over, it's a massive loss for Teiki, so Kiyo thinks Teiki must be devastated by this, but in reality, he's more fired up than ever. Playing against Haryu has given him the chance to figure out what his playstyle is lacking, so he says he is going to try to stay more active in the match next time. Kiyo is surprised since he thought Teiki would be a little more bothered than this after what he heard Haryu say earlier, but he already decided that he wouldn't let that stuff get to him anymore, and he refuses to make excuses for himself. Besides, it's not like he's playing badminton just to get close to Chinatsu. He truly loves the sport. With that said, it's time for round 2, so Teiki heads back onto the court, but as he's tying his shoes, he notices the bracelet Chinatsu gave him, and that reminds him of the promise he made that he would make it to nationals this year, so he's going to keep pushing forward to that goal. As the match continues, Teiki is locked in, and with his priorities in order, it becomes evident that he's doing a lot better than he was before. By the time the match is over, Teiki still ended up losing, but he put up a really good fight against Haryu and nearly tied the score, so Kiyo is sure that the coach will put him on the starting team. That's good news, but Teiki is still upset that he lost the match even if Haryu is undeniably better than him right now, so he finds it really frustrating. Haryu was apparently listening in on the conversation, and he also feels extremely frustrated because Teiki had him up against the ropes in that last round. As Teiki is walking home that day, he thinks about all the things he learned from playing against Haryu, and he accepts that he needs to start playing more aggressively if he wants to have any hope of beating him. Just then, Chinatsu shows up and tells Teiki to follow her because there's somewhere she wants to go before the sun sets. She leads him to the park, and he admits that it's nice out here, but he still has no idea why she brought him here, so Chinatsu pulls out a pair of rackets she borrowed from the school and says she wants to play a game of badminton with him. She usually feels the most motivated after a challenging game, so she figured Teiki would feel the same way and wants to give him the chance to practice a little more. Teiki appreciates the gesture, but when Chinatsu is meant to serve, she demonstrates her absolute lack of badminton skill. Teiki thinks it's hilarious, but he gives Chinatsu a few pointers on how to serve properly, so she's able to get it right eventually. While they play, she tells him that she was watching his match against Haryu, but Teiki feels embarrassed that he lost, so he asks her to please forget that ever happened. Shinatsu doesn't think there's anything to be embarrassed. He put up a really good fight in the second half of the game, and he was arguably outperforming Haryu at one point because he scored 11 points in the time it took Haryu to score 10. Teiki pauses for a second to do the math, but even if it checks out, he's still lost, so he doesn't feel like it's worth celebrating over. Shinatsu laughs a little because she can tell that Teiki really hates losing. That's one of his good qualities. During practice, whenever he was given constructive criticism, he would do his best to improve upon it. And it's that determination that allowed him to make a comeback in the second half of the match, so she's sure he will be fine. Teiki has a hard time believing in himself, but if Shinatsu says he can do it, he has no choice but to believe her, so he says he will do his best to win next time. Just then, Teiki's mom sends a text to Shinatsu and asks when she and Teiki will be home since it's getting late. While she's on her phone, Teiki notices a tag on Shinatsu's bag that says Chi, and he feels a sharp pain in his chest because he thinks it might be from Haryu. But Shinatsu explains that it was a gift from her classmates and everyone just calls her Chi. She then asks if Teiki is ready to go, but he says he will hang back a little since while it may not be embarrassing for her, he would feel way too embarrassed to be walking home to the same house with a girl that isn't his sister. Besides, he wants to get a few more practice swings in before he heads home anyway, so Shinatsu heads home first. The next day, Teiki is shocked to find out that he has been teamed up with Haryu for the doubles event. And this is really inconvenient for him since he is trying to beat Haryu, so how he's supposed to do that now that they are on the same team? Kiyo agrees that it may be a little awkward playing with his love rival, but even ignoring the fact that he likes Chinatsu, he still wanted to beat Haryu at least once. Just then, Haryu walks up behind Teiki because they need to practice together, and Teiki starts freaking out because Haryu might have heard him say he likes Chinatsu, and it turns out he definitely overheard it. A little while later, Teiki and Haryu are in the middle of some intense practice, and Teiki is starting to look tired, so Haryu tells him he can take a break if he wants. But then he also says he has never heard Chinatsu complain about being tired before, so Teiki feels compelled to keep going. By the time he's finally done with all of his training, Teiki looks completely deflated. It's been going on like this for a week now, and the classroom is the only place he gets a chance to rest anymore. Kiyo is surprised because he never saw Haryu as much of a team player, so it's weird that he's working so hard to train Teiki to this extent. Hina comes up with a theory that since Haryu knows Teiki likes Chinatsu, he may be making him work so hard just to mess with him. Even if that's what he's trying to do, Takei does feel inferior to Haryu because he does the exact same training with Takei, that he never slows down or complains about needing a break. During the next training session with Haryu calls a timeout and starts giving him advice on the way he plays. He tells him that he can't keep going for the easy shots all the time because he will never improve if he doesn't take risks. Takei thanks him for the advice and immediately begins working to implement it in his playstyle, and Haryu can't help but respect his work ethic. By the end of the day, Takei is left so sore that he needs a stick to help him get around, but as he is heading home, he runs into the second-year students outside the school gate, and Haryu sees this as the perfect opportunity to mess with him. So he introduces Takei to everyone and begins telling all his friends just how much Takei sucks at badminton, and Takei can't even deny it, and since everything Haryu is saying is true. However, once he is done, Haryu tells everyone that Takei may not be good now, but with how hard he works, he will become great in no time. Just then, Haryu gets a text on his phone, and when asked who it is, he says it's his girlfriend. Takei can't believe Haryu has a girlfriend and asks how long they've been going out, so he tells him that it all happened a week ago. He had liked the girl for a long time, but she's in show business and never had the courage to ask her out, so she did it instead. All the time he spent with Chinatsu was just him asking her for advice on a good gift to get her, so Haryu never actually liked Chinatsu and was really messing with him just for the sake of it. A month has passed since Chinatsu first moved in, and Takei is finally getting used to seeing her every morning. He sits down to have breakfast with her, and his mom went through the trouble of washing both Takei and Chinatsu's gym clothes, and she reminds Takei to take his before he leaves. So he grabs a set of gym clothes off the table and heads off to school. At school, he receives a text from Chinatsu asking if he accidentally took her gym clothes, and upon checking, he realizes that he does have her clothes. Chinatsu isn't upset, but she has gym class later today, so she's going to need her clothes back before then, and Takei offers to bring them to her immediately. Of course, he can't just hand her the gym clothes in public, so they plan to meet in the AV room since it should be empty. However, as Takei is headed to the AV room, he runs into Haryu, and he knows if Haryu finds out about this, he is going to be teased relentlessly. So to avoid having to practice with him, Takei runs away. He finally makes it to the AV room, but just when he thought he was safe, he finds Hina and a bunch of her friends in there, and Hina finding out about this would be even worse than Haryu. He asks what she's doing here, so Hina explains that the gymnastics team always holds meetings here, but now that she has answered his questions, she wants to know what he's doing here since he has never been here before. Takei tries to make up an excuse, but a girl walks up from behind and startles him, so he accidentally drops Chinatsu's uniform on the ground. Hina is about to help him pick it up, but Takei yells for her to stop because if she picks it up, she'll see Chinatsu's name on the jacket. Hina stops and asks why he doesn't want her to pick it up, but she's probably going to do it anyway to mess with him. So Takei has to think of a really good excuse and ends up saying he hasn't washed that thing in months. Hina recoils in disgust once he says that, so Takei has gotten what he wanted, but what cost? He bends down to pick up the gym clothes, and Hina starts questioning what he said because she has seen him wearing his gym clothes during gym class, so Takei is forced to double down and says he has been wearing his gym clothes all year without washing them, so Hina recoils further in disgust. So far, he has managed to keep people from finding out that he has Chinatsu's gym clothes, but there are people everywhere, he can't find a good place to actually return her clothes to her. And if he doesn't get it to her soon, she'll have no choice but to wear Takei's uniform instead, and he doesn't know if he could handle that. Just then, Takei receives a text from her saying he should meet her on the west side of the roof, so he heads up and finds Chinatsu waiting for him. He's glad he can finally return her uniform, but he wonders how she got the key to the door since the roof is usually restricted. Chinatsu explains that she borrowed a key from one of her friends in the astronomy club, but a few moments later, the bell rings, meaning Chinatsu has to get to her gym class soon and she's running low on time. So she decides to just change her clothes up on the roof. Takei freaks out over it, but she assures him it's fine since she knows how to change her clothes under her shirt. But Takei doesn't think it's fine at all and says he will wait on the other side of the door to make sure no one comes up here. Chinatsu begins changing her clothes, and Takei does his best to think wholesome thoughts, but the sound from Chinatsu's clothes makes his imagination go wild, and by the time she's done, Takei has been forced into a squat to hide his boner. She asks him if something is wrong, but Takei says he is fine and tells Chinatsu to go on ahead without him because he needs a few minutes by himself. Once she leaves, Takei thinks to himself that if Chinatsu is so comfortable changing clothes in front of him, that must mean she doesn't think of him as a guy, so he's going to need to change that at some point. Later that day, Takei has just finished practicing with Haryu and is heading home for the day, but as he is leaving, Hina spots him and reminds him that regional preliminaries are tomorrow, but he shouldn't get himself worked up because he'll just embarrass himself. Takei tells her to mind her own business, but Hina says she'll be there to make fun of him if he messes up. Once she leaves, Haryu asks if there's anything going on between Takei and Hina because they seem to get along great, but Takei immediately denies it. Haryu thinks their relationship is funny then, but he doesn't think Hina is right because there's no reason for Takei to get all worked up over the match. He's playing doubles with Haryu, so Haryu is sure they will win their match together. But if Takei wants to move up to the next level, he is going to have to make it to the top 16 in his singles match next week. Takei says he is well aware and he isn't worried about it, since he is a lot better than he used to be, so he is perfectly prepared for the match. However, Haryu doesn't buy it since someone who is perfectly prepared wouldn't have forgotten their racket bag in the gym. Takei suddenly realizes he doesn't have his bag with him. So he asks why Haryu didn't say something sooner, or he knew, but Haryu was just waiting to see how long it would take for Takei to figure it out. Later that night, Takei's mom is pacing around the house because she's nervous about Takei's big game tomorrow. But Takei tells her there's no need to be so worried because he has already packed everything he's going to need ahead of time. He may have said that, but once he gets back to his room, he is so nervous that he can hardly get any sleep. He doesn't know why he is panicking so much because it's not like this is his first time playing badminton. But he is really worried and doesn't want to end up losing because of a stupid mistake, especially after the promise he made with Chinatsu. He decides to go out and practice a little more to clear his head. But while he's out there, Chinatsu notices him and asks why he is still practicing this late into the night. He says he's just doing this to get in a few extra minutes of training. But Chinatsu can tell that he must be nervous because he accidentally put his shirt on inside out. Teiki realizes his mistake, so he takes off his shirt to wear it properly. But as he does so, he notices that Chinatsu is blushing and then she looks away, so he apologizes for mindlessly taking his shirt off in front of her. Earlier, she didn't seem bothered when she changed in front of him, so he doesn't understand why she's getting flustered now, but it looks like what made her blush is the fact that Teiki has a six-pack now. She thinks it's really cool and says he probably has it because of how hard he has been working. But Teiki doesn't think a six-pack is special because no matter how much muscle he gains, it won't automatically make him better at badminton. Shinatsu sees that he's still worried about his match tomorrow, so she asks Teiki to come over to her for a second, and when he does, she pokes his head so Teiki jumps back in shock. She tells him that she was trying to hit a pressure point on his head that is meant to help him relax. There's no point in working himself to death the night before the match, so he should stop overthinking things and trust that the work he has been putting into his training will be enough to earn him his victory. And besides, even if he doesn't make it this year, he can just try against next year or the year after that. But by then, Shinatsu would have already graduated, so Teiki is even more determined than ever to make it to nationals this year. Tomorrow comes and Teiki is pumped to get the preliminaries started, but all his enthusiasm may have been a little overboard because all the matches end in decisive victories without him having to do much. Harry really wasn't joking when he said he would carry the team, and Teiki knows the only reason things have been going so smoothly is because Harry has been covering for his mistakes. Just then, Teiki notices a guy nearby who's playing really aggressively, and at first he thinks the guy might just be hot-headed, but it turns out that he's actually pretty good. After the guy has won his match, he looks over and he seems to recognize Harry, so he starts calling out to him. But Harry is clearly trying to avoid him. The guy eventually gets in front of him, so Hardy is forced to acknowledge that they know each other because they used to be on the same badminton team back in junior high. His name is Kishi, and he's currently pissed at Harry because he backed out of a bet he made. Teiki asks what the bet was about, so Kishi explains that Harry promised to give him Chinatsu's number, but he never did it. Harry clarifies that the bet was only if Kishi beat him in an official match, but Harry has only ever lost to Kishi in unofficial matches. Teiki is still hung up on the fact that Kishi wants Chinatsu's number, so he asks how he knows her. Kishi gladly recounts the fateful he met Chinatsu and tells Teiki that at the school festival last year, he lost his wallet, but Chinatsu returned it to him. That's pretty much all it took for him to fall in love with her, and since then, he has been asking Harry to introduce him to her. But Harry keeps avoiding the subject. But today is the day he finally beats Harry in an official match and makes him hand over Chinatsu's number. Unfortunately, just as he says this, his doubles partner tells him that he's not feeling so good, and a few minutes later he had to be taken to the hospital by ambulance, so there's no way Kishi can compete anymore today. Luckily, he has already won enough matches to qualify for the preliminaries, but he still wants to play a match against Harry, so he says he will be at him in the singles tournament next week. However, Harry isn't actually participating in that tournament, and his next official match is scheduled for 2 months from now, so Kishi will have to wait for a while to face him. But since Kishi is being so insistent, Harry offers to introduce him to Chinatsu if he can beat Teiki in next week's tournament. Kishi takes one look at Teiki and thinks beating him is going to be easy, so he was off to start planning out what he will say to Chinatsu, and before Harry leaves as well, he warns Teiki that Kishi is a lot better than he looks, so he should be careful. By the time Teiki gets home, he is still pissed that Harry volunteered him for his bet, but he doesn't intend to lose because he hates the idea of Kishi getting close to Chinatsu. He's about to enter the living room, but he hears Chinatsu and his mom talking to each other, and he thinks it would be awkward to talk to Chinatsu after the conversation he had with her last night, so he hesitates to enter. He hears Chinatsu say she's glad he won his match, but she's a little worried that she might have made him mad last night. She told him that he didn't need to worry so much because he can still try to get to nationals next year or the year after. And while when she said it she was just worried he was overworking himself, she now realizes that she was basically saying she expected him to fail. Teiki's mom asks if that's what she meant when she said that, and of course, Chinatsu didn't mean that, so Teiki's mom doesn't think Teiki will be mad about it. Teiki hadn't taken any offense from Chinatsu's statements at the time. He really just wanted to make it to nationals before she graduated, and that hasn't changed, so he walks in and proudly exclaimed that he won his doubles match today, and he's going to win his singles match next week as well. The next week, time has finally come for Teiki and Kishi's match, and as they start playing, Kishi's skill becomes apparent because his smashes are too powerful for Teiki to return. By chance, Shinatsu's team happened to be in the gym that day, so they all decide to watch, and from what they can tell, Teiki is on the losing side because he is only playing defensively. Harry tells them that it's all part of Teiki's plan because he knows he is slow at repositioning himself, and he wouldn't be able to keep up with Kishi in a battle of aggression, so he's trying to tire him out first. While the match is going on, Kyo approaches Chinatsu and he can tell that she is really rooting for Teiki, so he lets her know that Harry made a bet involving her phone number, and she's not happy about that. Chinatsu has a large influence over Teiki's motivation even if she doesn't realize it, and it's mostly because of her that he has improved so much in such a short amount of time. That's the reason Takei is so hell-bent on winning, but he doesn't actually get anything if he wins, so Kiyo suggests she should take him to the aquarium or something as a reward for all his hard work, and Chinatsu thinks that's a good idea, so she continues rooting for Takei's victory. This was the end of episode 4. Subscribe to not miss the next part.